Hello, and welcome to Everybody Eats, a Washington Wizards podcast on the Blue Wire Network. My name is Varun Shankar. I'm the Wizards reporter for the Washington Post. On this week's show, I had on Rob Mahoney from The Ringer, and we talked about all things Wizards. We went through the usual in-season outline where we talk about the most important story for the Wizards, stock up, stock down, ahead of the curve, and what are we looking forward to over the next weekend. Because I haven't done this format a little bit, we did it over the last couple weeks. Before we get to that, if you like the show, please like, rate, review, share, or subscribe on whatever platform you use. I cannot tell you how much it would help the show and how much it would mean to me if you're able to do so. Rob was great. Let's get to that conversation right now. Joining me now on the Everybody Eats podcast is senior staff writer for The Ringer, Rob Mahoney. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Look, any day where I get to talk about the Wizards is a great day, especially when they are apparently the best basketball team in the world.
Oh, man. So it's funny because I think the first time I was like, oh, I have to have Rob on the pod was when I was listening to you and Zach Lowe do the League Pass rankings before the year, and you put the Wizards at 7th in your rankings. I went back and re-listened just to make sure, and you said that you had nowhere to give out your Bilal Coulibaly takes. This is the place. This is the place people are listening for Bilal Coulibaly takes, and we will get to that. But first, let's do a quick status check of the Wizards. They are 2-15 after winning last night over the Hawks. We are recording Wednesday afternoon. The Wizards are 30th in net rating, 28th in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating per cleaning the glass. So I guess I got to start by this. How do you feel about that League Pass ranking early in the season?
You know, it's not. This is what I expected for the record. The Wizards were going to be bad, basically, no matter how certain players popped. There have been some small disappointments for me in terms of individual prospects, and we will definitely get to that. But like, I'm here for this particular ride. And the spirit of a League Pass ranking to me, if you don't have your hobby horses among some of the worst teams in the league, what are you even doing here? You know, like, I'm going to watch the Thunder enough. I'm going to watch the Rockets and the Knicks and the Cavs, and we're going to have our status checks on all these teams. But I want to be here when Keyshawn George starts to pop. I want to be here for the Alex Sarr experience to kind of get a foothold into how his development is going and every stage of it. So like, this is as advertised for me. I am just the kind of sicko who enjoys watching this sort of thing.
All right, well, fair, and this is the place to share all of that sicko knowledge. I'm in a group chat called Wizard Sickos, which is perhaps the most apt thing, and the really sad thing is I was in that group chat before I got this job. All right, let's start where all good journalism should and get to the lead. Rob Mahoney, what is the most important Wizard story from the last couple weeks?
I think that their defense, for all its like individual potential defensive talent, is so bad that it gives them basically no chance to win any of these games. Like, again, they've had incredibly hot shooting. They've had good individual offensive performances here and there. They just put themselves behind the 8 ball so quickly and so emphatically with their defense that it's hard to imagine, given this version of this team, how they're going to get meaningfully better without changing some like the fundamental habits behind it.
What are the things that stand out to you the most as like the biggest red flags?
I think the biggest one is they are an egregious turn and watch team. So when the first drive goes into the paint, everyone on the weak side just stands still but pivots and just turns around and watches it happen, which is why you see the Wizards just get beat. Back cut after back cut, offensive rebound after offensive rebound. It's like they're one of these teams where the longer a possession goes on, the more I am positive they're going to blow it. And that's not what you want from any team. And on paper, it makes sense for a bunch of young players to behave that way. But it's just the reason why, even though you say, oh, I like this guy on defense, I like who this guy could be on defense, there's just no cohesiveness to anything that they're doing at all.
Yeah, for me, it's that. It's also just the consistent miscommunications that you see. And it's gotten a little bit better over the last few games. But, I mean, you could see multiple times a game where one guy thinks he's switching, the other guy does not think he's switching, and before you know it, you have two guys on the ball when in a situation where you're not trying to have two guys on the ball. So the defense has been a real problem. I think last time I checked, you know, when it comes to the actual field goal percentage they're giving up, they're not actually that bad. But they're giving up so many shots at the rim. They're giving up a lot. They're not giving up that many threes, actually, and they're giving up a lot of mid-range shots. So the shot profile is not like the worst in the world, but that's, I think, a lot in part because a lot of shots are coming at the rim. So, yeah, I guess that kind of brings me into my lead over the last couple weeks. And I would say this is even true this is a question I've been wrestling with over the last couple years. Does any of this matter? The Wizards want to be
just globally, just in terms of our day-to-day lives,
absolutely,
you know?
Yeah. The Wizards really bring out a little bit of the nihilist in me. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, they want to
Fitting.
be bad, right? All the incentives align for them to be bad. I'll go over them again in case anyone doesn't know, but they have a top 8 protected pick. If they finish outside the top 8, this pick goes to the New York Knicks. If they finish inside the top 8, it turns into 2 second-round picks. They want a really high pick. It's a great draft class, all that stuff. Does it matter how bad they are? And before you answer, a few points to kind of drive this home.
Sure.
Until last night, the Wizards were on pace for the worst per-game point differential in NBA history. Even after last night's 19-point win, they're only up to second worst. It's some 90s Dallas team. They're on pace to win under 10 games. Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr have taken real strides, especially Sarr. Sarr was excellent last night. I wrote about him for the Washington Post. You go check that out. This is an extremely young team. There's a stat that the Wizards PR sends out where they entered the Atlanta game with players who are 22 years old or younger accounting for about 58% of the team's rotation minutes. So it's a team comprised of entirely young players, and those players are going to make mistakes, and so it makes sense that the team on average is bad. But they are so bad. They have lost 7 games by at least 20 points. That's the most in the NBA. Mm-hmm. So I guess I come back to this question. Does any of that matter? Is if they land Darren Peterson in the draft next year and Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr continue doing a reasonable facsimile of what they've been doing, does any of this matter?
I think it's hard to blanket statement that because the short answer is it depends on the psychology of the players involved. Because there are some prospects who never kind of get out from behind that hump of being on tanking teams early, and they almost need to, change locations, change teams to sort of get the taste out of their mouth. That's a real thing that happens in the NBA. You just have all these associations from like slumming it for so long, especially when you're stacking year over year over year. Now, if the Wizards land a high pick as expected and are just much more competitive next year, a lot of this goes away very quickly, and that bad taste gets washed out of your mouth pretty naturally. Most young players are put through these paces. I think this is a pretty normal developmental experience for the most part. Like what Keyshawn George is going through is not atypical. It just depends on how Keyshawn George, the human being, processes this sort of extended bull. If it's just like loss after loss after loss, and in particular how that feels come like January 28th, March 15th, when you're really in the thick of it and there's just no way out this season beyond we're going to have to be so bad we tank our way through this thing.
Yeah, I think that's where I come down. I still think that at the end of the day, if Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr emerge as legitimate building blocks moving forward, and we'll see who else might emerge or not emerge as the season goes on, but even if it's just those two, I think you come out of the season feeling reasonably okay if you're the Wizards. But I'm going to be honest, there are some of these games where you do get a little concerned about what this could mean for the long-term future, just in terms of building a team identity, right? You're a team that wants to be a defensive-led team and force turnovers, and you haven't really done that so far. You did it last night against Atlanta, but other than that, it's been very hit or miss. Sarr is excellent as a rim protector. He's excellent as a rim defender or a defender in general, but he's got such a heavy burden on him because of how many shots get into the paint. You do wonder, those are reps, so I guess that's a good thing. But on the other hand, is there any downstream effects that could come from this? I mean, Keyshawn George takes these losses hard, man. He said it at one practice or at some point, but he was like, I have more of a role on this year's team, and because of that, I'm starting to feel the losses a bit more. And you could see that, I think, after some of the most recent losses, you could see that he starts to wear these a little bit more than he did his first year. And I think on one hand, that's good. You want players to be dissatisfied with losing. You want them to feel the pain of that and to want to win eventually at some point, obviously. But at the same time, you don't want to break anyone's spirit in the process.
Totally. And this is, I think, where you run the most risk of that, particularly for teams like the Wizards, who are a talent pool in search of an organizing principle. Like you're saying, there is no definitive identity. They're reaching for certain things, but ultimately failing. There isn't that one standout superstar talent who just makes everything make sense. It is going to be fumbling around in the dark a little bit. And specifically on defense, just like hoping and praying that Alex Sarr can clean up your messes is not a defensive identity. So whatever they have to do to kind of get their feet under them by the end of this season, I think would go a long way to just making everyone feel a little bit more sane.
What's a reasonable expectation for where the Wizards should finish at the end of the season as a defense? Because right now, I think I said 29th, right? If they're a little bit better than that, is that worthwhile?
I mean, is the difference between 25th and 29th that dramatically meaningful? In the grand scheme of things, no. But in terms of what it reflects for the day-to-day reality of the Wizards, it could be, right? It's just a matter of how that feels in game. And this is one of those things that's a little harder to capture by the like end of season numbers, but I actually do think it would make a difference. I think it would make a difference for the people involved. I think it would make a difference because if you get to that point, it tells you something about Bilal Coulibaly. It tells you something about, Tre Johnson when he comes back into the lineup. Like, hopefully it is indicative of a movement, not just like, oh, we had some good 3-point luck in terms of our defense and therefore we bumped up a few points. Like, hopefully it does signal something about the team itself.
Yeah, that's why for me, and I think this is something, I know this is something the Wizards care about. They want to see how they perform with some of their more advanced guys, particularly on defense on the court. So I'm personally going to be keeping a very keen eye on what the Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly trio does on defense for the rest of the season. And you want to see, I don't think they have to be, they don't have to grade out as like an elite defense with those three guys on the court, but you want to see them be respectable, right? And start to show some of the disruption and some of the tenacity that the Wizards want to see from them moving forward.
Yes. I think it's also worth noting that like the veterans that they have that are playing are either have never really been defense first players in any respect like CJ McCollum, or are just way past their defensive primes like Chris Middleton. And so yes, those guys are great to have around for locker room reasons, in terms of like knowing where to be defensively on the court, have something to show a lot of these younger players, but are not anchors. Like, they're not pillars who are going to be able to prop up a defense until the young guys come along. It's just not structured that way.
Absolutely. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen because of the young players, which is a heavy burden to place on young players. All right, let's move to the few things that have gone well for the Wizards over the last couple of weeks. What's your first stock up?
I think it has to be Sarr, and specifically like his offensive development. To see this much this soon is very reassuring. I think the last thing you want if you're the Wizards or any rebuilding team is to look at this guy who you're hoping can be one of your foundational players and start to quickly think of him as like some kind of specialist, right? Like, we drafted him with all this hope and ambition, and it's like, oh, maybe he is just like a rim protector and that's it. And so to see him come into his own offensively and specifically as a finisher, I think is really and incredibly important in terms of the overall trajectory of this team, right? Just shifting Alex Sarr from the space from a total question mark on offense, really struggled inside, specifically with other bigs, was, I think you could argue with like how many threes he should or should not have been taking, whether that's good for his development then or now. I think those are fair conversations to have. But point blank, he's just straight up a better offensive player now than I expected him to be. And so from that perspective, I'm thrilled with the development there.
Absolutely. It's also really good for the Wizards because if this was not the case for Sarr in his second season, if it looked more like his rookie season, we would be having some questions about what's going on in San Antonio and Chicago, being like, should you have taken Castle? Should you have taken Vazelis? And I think that Sarr has absolutely quieted those questions. He is still being efficient at the rim. He's a little less so in the short mid-range area for cleaning the glass, but still decent there. I think that Chris Middleton has been excellent for him as a pick-and-roll partner. Middleton is really good at setting Sarr up, and they have quickly formed a good chemistry. I think Middleton is also teaching Sarr a little bit more about how to read the game as a screener, and you've seen Sarr be more effective in that respect. But, I mean, it's Brian Keefe will say this again and again in every single press conference. It starts for Sarr with the defense, and it's unreal. A year ago, he was getting the blocks, he was getting some of the flashy stuff, and it wasn't showing up in the underlying numbers. Now it's there in the underlying numbers, and it's there in the rim deterrence. There was a play last night where Dyson Daniels drove in, and I'm not sure what Daniels was trying to do. He was about to go up for a shot, and then I think he saw there, and he tried to, change in midair. He throws a pass. Sarr swats that away, too. So you could see that there's a legitimate fear of going to the rim because Alex Sarr is there, and that's something that I don't know the last Wizards rim protector. Daniel Gaffer was okay in that respect, but I don't think Sarr is on the number one, the first tier of rim protectors in the NBA, but I think he's firmly establishing himself as someone in that tier of Jaren Jackson Jr., Evan Mobley, even maybe that's a little ambitious, but I think that area.
But for as murky as things are right now, it's great to have the path from where Alex Sarr is now to all defense is pretty clearly defined. Like, you can see that road ahead of him, and that's an exciting place to be, especially in the grand lineage of Wizards rim protectors, as you said, where the best case you were hoping, if you're talking about a Daniel Gafford, is activity, right? Like, he's there, he's bouncing, he's jumping at things. I think Alex Sarr's discipline is pretty impressive for his age. I think he's proven to be a little more sophisticated and advanced in year two in terms of how he is challenging shots, how he is taking away actions, again, than I would have anticipated. So rapidly improving on the Alex Sarr front. The stock is quickly rising, and that's an area where, when we're talking about the Wizards charting their future and anticipating who they were going to be, like Alex Sarr's development was not a booming bullet point on my league pass rankings. It was just kind of it's been an incredibly pleasant surprise.
Absolutely. You talk about the discipline that he's showing. I think that shows in how he's not fouling. Which, despite the rim protection, despite the amount of shots that he contests, he has a ridiculously low foul rate for a big man. And that's something that, as we're trying to project this forward and looking at all defense teams, all-star teams, as we're trying to get, a little more lofty with it,
Yeah.
is that something that could separate him from someone like Jaren Jackson Jr., who has consistently struggled with that throughout his career? And so that's obviously been a very common point of comparison for Sarr, and it's one that I'm very interested to see how their careers continue to shape as the years go on. Is there anything with Sarr's offense, particularly his play inside, that feels unsustainable to you?
Not particularly. I think, look, he's ultimately when the scout gets out on these guys, they always take a little bit of a hit. And so the adjustment from how perimeter oriented he was last season to just scoring so much more on the roll this year, just being more of a factor inside, even just like the particular way given his size that he has to pivot his way into open shots sometimes and open layups. That's the kind of thing where if you see it on tape and you're playing the Wizards in a playoff series, yeah, you learn to stay down on some of that stuff. If we're talking about how you scout the Wizards in a playoff series, that is a distant possibility. That is a great one. So like those are, to me, are problems not just for like tomorrow or next year, but like 3 years down the line.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to my first stock up, and I'll go CJ McCollum. He had a horrendous start to the season, and now he's backed up to basically more of his career numbers since November 10th, and this includes his 46-point explosion yesterday. In 7 games, he's averaging about 24 points per game. He's shooting 50.8% from the field and 50.9 on threes.
Yeah.
Wizards fans have been a little upset with McCollum because of his shot-happy ways. I think it's worth acknowledging that he is at the lowest usage rate of his career since his second season, I should say, per Cleaning the Glass. It's still relatively high, don't get me wrong, but this is a player who is trying to step back. And the swap of him and Jordan Poole was primarily about the Wizards getting cap flexibility this offseason because McCollum's on expiring. But people with the Wizards also told me that they thought having a less ball-dominant player than Poole would be helpful for the young guys, would be helpful to allow Keyshawn George to grow into his role in this offense. Same for Bilal Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, so on and so forth. I don't know that I've seen that as much, in part because I think an underrated part of Poole's game is he's a pretty good facilitator when he wants to be, and that's obviously a pretty open question at times with Jordan Poole, but McCollum is, throughout his career, been a low assist, low turnover player, a low pass player. He's going to get a shot up on a possession. It's probably going to be for him, but he's going to get a shot up. Do you think that his presence has had a uplifting effect on the Wizards' young players like I think the Wizards expected it to?
I have not seen it. Even during this like recent stretch, yes, CJ is playing so much better. And maybe ultimately like the uplift of him playing better is that longer term, he makes the Wizards a little bit more functional just by scoring a little more efficiently when he is going.
Keep and also just moving.
Very important. And also like it is the candy coating that you need to dangle the CJ McCollum trade conversation, right? Like to keep that moving down the line. And that is one maybe more closely reserved for like January, February. But the guy we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that's a player who has real value to a competitive team. Does he have real value to where the Wizards are right now? I just don't see him like being a rising tide for this particular group.
In conversations about McCollum's trade value that I've had with people, it's mostly been framed as if the Wizards are going to get a first round pick out of this, they're going to need to take back some bad salary as well. And just because of, I think McCollum was like a $30 million cap hit this season, that's going to be a thing that they have to do no matter what. And so, I mean, but the way he's played, it becomes a more real conversation than I think it would have been otherwise. Where before you're kind of looking at it as a pure, just he's treated as an expiring contract, and now maybe there's some actual positive value because I mean, he's a legitimately talented player, obviously, and one who's shown that he still has that ability to put the ball in the basket, which is very valuable. One thing I like that the Wizards did yesterday is playing CJ less as a point guard and letting Chris Middleton facilitate the offense. I love the way that Middleton played yesterday. Some of the stuff that he did from the post was great. Some of the stuff that he did running pick and rolls with Alex Sarr was wonderful. And so that's a switch that I would like to see them lean into a little bit more and use CJ a little bit more off the ball. Who's your next stock up?
So I had McCollum as well, but I do want to talk about Keyshawn as another one. I think as a legitimate stakeholder in this team. You know, you talked about the sense of responsibility and accountability for the losses, which I agree with you. I think is a good thing, even if it weighs on him. but also just in terms of the like Swiss Army knife utility that the Wizards are getting out of their forward spots. I mean, Keyshawn seems so much further along than Bilal does at this point. Like
Yeah.
just so much more stable in terms of the night to night variability of I'm being thrown into high leverage defensive assignments, but also I need to handle the ball, but also I need to be a cutter and a shooter and like balancing the many responsibilities that come with that sort of role. I think he's done pretty well overall. Again, like a little foul prone here and there more than you would like, a little overly aggressive at times. And certainly we've seen cases where, like late in that game against the Bulls, just like was not capable of manufacturing a big time shot in a big time moment. The good news is like that's probably not his long-term role. His long-term role is going to be filling the gaps, and you're seeing him fill a lot of different gaps at a lot of different times.
Yeah, I actually had Keyshawn in stock down just because the last couple of weeks have been a little bit of a downturn. Still very
It's
high
fair.
on his long term future. Him versus Bilal is a very interesting contrast because I think that Bilal is further ahead as a defender right now, but Keyshawn is much
Interesting.
further ahead as an offensive player. I would say Bilal on ball in particular because
Yeah.
Keyshawn I think is very good at reading plays, kind of disrupting things. But I mean, Bilal when he's on defense and it's been a little bit inconsistent for him as he's just kind of navigating some injuries and getting into the flow of the lineup. I mean, he's a menace on defense, and against Atlanta, he was everywhere, and I felt that.
Totally.
We'll get to Coulibaly later, but I still remain pretty bullish on what he can be, even if it's not potentially the high end outcomes that people envisioned when he was initially drafted. But
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I'm by no means is it time to bail on the Bilal Coulibaly experience. Like there are some bumps right now. I still like ultimately who he is as a prospect.
yeah, yeah. All right, my next is Corey Kispert. Just a really good NBA player. He gets a lot of flack from Wizards fans, I think partly just because he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, so what is the nature of the flack? Like I watch Corey Kispert, I'm like, this guy is just good?
Yeah, I mean that's what I see, but people have issues with some of the ways that the second unit is structured around getting him the ball in some instances, some of his
Okay.
defensive lapses, and those are I think somewhat real. But I mean, he's in
Sure.
the 90th percentile in cleaning glasses efficiency metric. He's up to 40.3% on three pointers. He's confident. I mean, yesterday he was hunting those looks in transition. Worth noting, he did have a thumb injury that took him out during the third quarter yesterday. We
I
don't have
know.
an update on it. It is not the thumb he had surgery on in the offseason, for whatever that's worth. I also love Corey as an attacker. He is in the 87th percentile among rims in finishing at the rim, and you can see that like he is putting his shoulder into guys. And
Yes.
at some point in Corey Kispert's career, he realized, oh, I'm really big. I might not be like the greatest athlete, but I'm a big guy, and he's putting his shoulder into dudes, and he's a physical finisher, and it was evident, especially against Chicago. He is obviously not an elite defender,
Yeah.
but in the NBA as it is today, it's a weak league system. Teams are going to hunt you if you can't hang on defense. Do you feel like do you feel like Kispert is a guy who is so bad on defense that he could not get minutes on a contending team?
I don't feel that way at all. I think some of it is just like the size, some of it is perception. Like, yeah, if you put him out there as the fifth member of the Oklahoma City Thunder, yeah, teams are going to go at him so they don't have to go at Casey Wallace, right? But plug him into many winning situations in the league. I think he is just a guy, like a little bit of a liability here and there. Yes, he's going to have some matchups where he gets worked, but if you have the structure to protect him, and I say that not just in terms of like, oh, you want a rim protector behind him and you want other like elite perimeter defenders alongside him, but the actual defensive structure of rotation that's going to help everything tie together. I'm honestly not really that worried about Corey Kispert. Like I think he is stable enough where I am willing to ride everything he gives you as a shooter, as you said, not just as a finisher, but like a finisher in closeout specifically, which is what changes, when you compare him to someone like Luke Kennard, right? Like Luke Kennard is an amazing shooter, pretty good at the wheeling and dealing part of attacking a closeout, like spraying out to someone else. But you ask him to finish through contact or even just like through a crowd, it's not really going to happen. And so having that straight line variability as an option for a shooter like Kispert, I think is a huge deal. And those are the kinds of buckets specifically that are you have to settle for in tough game situations, right? If you're not able to finish through contact like that, you're going to get played off the floor.
Absolutely. I think all of what we just talked about makes Corey Kispert a pretty intriguing option as we look at this deadline. It's a great contract, obviously, and so worth keeping an eye on. Did you have any other stock ups?
That's it for me for stock up. Yeah, CJ, Keyshawn, and Sarr to me are the three guys right now. And like, I mean, Just on an aesthetic level, watching CJ McCollum basically touch the face of God last night was a
Oh my god.
distinct privilege, and I enjoyed it. And I mean, lump Kispert in that too. I thought there was just like a, I don't know, 8 minute stretch where I did not think either of them would ever miss again.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to put Cam Whitmore in stock up
Mm,
because he had a very nice last couple weeks. He had, played consistent minutes after he'd been under 10 for a little bit.
yeah.
And then he plays like 9.5 minutes versus Atlanta. He doesn't play at all in the fourth quarter. He had one shot attempt. I didn't notice anything glaring when I look back on the last few possessions before he was taken out for the last time. And I asked Brian Keefe about it after the game. He didn't really say that. He just said that, Corey coming out of the game kind of messed up the rotations. We want to give Malachi a look. I don't know. I don't know what happened, to be quite honest. So,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna hold off. But I remain intrigued by Cam Whitmore, and I think I am starting to see some of the early passing flashes that make me think that the tunnel vision might not be as big of a problem as it has been in the past.
I hope that is the case. It has been a problem for a long time running, and so we'll see if this is kind of more flash in the pan or if that's an actual kind of changing of his stripes. But I just as someone watching the Wizards, I do very much enjoy the leeway and the latitude he has gotten to just like if you get the rebound and you run hard, basically do whatever the you want. Sorry if my
You're
language, but
good.
like uh do whatever you want with this transition possession, which I think is a great use of his skills and a great like tool for young players too, in
Mhm.
terms of like if you go out and get this, you get to do whatever you want with this particular opportunity. And like Cam Whitmore, that is a guy who can fill it up if you give him any rope at all. And so getting to see him in those opportunities in those situations, I think has been just a delight.
He is a marvel when he gets out in the open court, and some of the things that he tries to do as a finisher, the adjustments in midair. Sometimes I'm like, there's wide open Corey Kispert in the
Oh,
court. You could
sure.
just like kick it out. It's a lot easier of a play, but
What
then
fun
he
would
makes it
that be,
work.
though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He wants to play the game sometimes on hard mode, and I'm like, maybe be
Yes.
just a little bit easier on yourself. You need to. Let's get to stock down. I'll start with Keyshawn George. Again, it is relative to where he was at the beginning of the season, not an
Yep.
overall thing. His finishing at the rim, which was excellent at the beginning of the season, has been pretty bad of late. Since January 10th, or sorry, since November 10th, he is in the 16th percentile among wings in that category. So it's something where you saw early in the year him able to get downhill and really finish, and that's been less of a strength for him of late. He's also turning the ball over a lot. He's in the 93rd percentile among wings in usage, 0th percentile in turnover percentage. That to
Yeah.
me screams of a guy who is a little overtaxed in the role he's been given, which makes sense. He's a second-year player who's asked to be probably the highest usage player on the Wizards, I would say, or among
Yeah.
at least, and someone who I think if the Wizards become a playoff caliber team, a really good team, he's not going to be playing this role. He might be running the second unit at times, but most of the time I like him as a second side creator.
Definitely. And he's like right at the precipice of his handle is good enough to kind of merit this sort of responsibility, but not so good that he should actually do it on an ongoing and constant basis. And so I do see him walking that developmental line of like trying stuff, like splitting a pick and roll, attacking a crowd that like maybe he's not like his handle isn't quite tight enough to actually pull off. I'm okay with the risks on some of those things, and then some of them are just kind of wild. So normal young player stuff from Keyshawn George, but I agree with you. Like the start was so hot, it was bound to come back to earth a little bit.
The experimentation is fine with me if it's an experimentation of aggression. If you are
Hmm.
trying to make plays for others, if you're trying to do the right thing and you're just, misfiring on a pass or misreading something, that's fine. And those are where most of the mistakes for me with Keyshawn have been so far
Yeah,
this year. One thing, and this is a complaint I have around the league, he has to stop complaining to the refs as much as he does.
it's
That's one thing.
bad.
It's
Like
really
with all
bad.
due respect, you are Keyshawn George. Like I don't think you quite have the cachet in this particular conversation that you think you do. So a lot of guys could take that lesson, but Keyshawn, Jesus, come on.
It's worth saying, though, at the end of that Chicago game, when they came with the double, that was on the last 2 minute report called a foul that was not called in game. So he did have a point there. He is fouling a lot. That's been a consistent issue throughout his career. He's very aggressive. Some of his
Yeah.
fouls of late have been less. I am totally fine with fouls where he's trying to reach in and be aggressive and trying to swipe the ball away. I'm less okay with the fouls, obviously, when he's just like shoving a guy every now and then. It
Yeah.
happens. How do you rate him as an on-ball defender?
See, I would put him a little further along than Bilal right now. Like
Interesting.
I think some of it is he feels a little less movable than Bilal does. Like for Bilal's length and activity, clearly can be incredibly disruptive. But there's just an element of like you can bump him off of you to create some space in a way that like Keyshawn feels a little more sturdy, like feels a little more physically strong in that particular way. And I do like the activity, but you're spot on the fouls, and it is the combination of those two aspects that then change the way he defends. Because like once you get in foul trouble, you have to reel back on the aggressive play, and the aggressive play is what makes him so good in the first place. So maybe I am over-indexing on the better version of Keyshawn in my kind of estimation, but if he can reel some of those other elements in, that version is really good, and that version is really exciting. It just is a matter of like, yeah, you can have 2 fouls, but you can't have 4 because of the dumb stuff.
It's interesting that you point to the sturdiness as something that separates him from Bilal, because the thing that I look at is Bilal is a little bit more, just a little quicker as a player, and his ability to move laterally is a little better than Keyshawn's is. And so maybe that's just a situation of they are both good on-ball defenders, but just got to be put in different matchups. One's on guard, one's more over forward. So something to keep in mind. I'll go to my first, or do you have a stock, Don? You go first.
I mean, literally everything about the defense.
Yeah.
We've already talked about that pretty extensively. To branch out from that, I guess this is half defense. The rebounding is just awful. And like this is an area where I'm just, it's so consistently terrible, and there are just cascading effects all over the floor. I mean, starting with the fact that Alex Sarr, for all of his strengths, is not a powerful box out presence. Like he is who he is. He's going to pull down a certain number of boards. That's great. He's not holding your team down on the glass alone. The team is playing small a lot of the time, and even within that, the guards and wings that they play are a little leaner, are a little more wiry, and it's just like a less physically imposing roster right now. And so like I don't want to read too much into a version of the team that is nobody's idea of the Wizards' final form. Like this is not what this roster and this rotation will look like when the Wizards are good again. I think my disappointment is specifically with some of the guards and wings who just like are not fighting on the glass really at all. And so it's like and this is an area where I think Bilal like struggles sometimes, where it's a little too flat-footed or a little too like waiting for the kick out to get out in transition, and not like, oh, you actually have to secure this rebound before you can move on.
It's one of the things where I'm okay with the defensive rebounds where you get, or the offensive rebounds for the other team where you get out-muscled, right? That's just going to happen when you're a young team. I am okay when it's a situation where Sarr is jumping up for a block, his guy gets in position. That happens at times.
Absolutely.
The ball watching is abysmal. It happens multiple times a game, no matter how many times they talk about it in pre and post game press conferences. It happens again and again. And I mean, that's just an attentiveness thing, right? That's just a balls in the air. Who's going to get it? Most of the time, it's not the Wizards.
Totally. And I mean, some of it is an attentiveness thing. Some of it is the specific way in which your motor kind of activates. And there are times where you look at this Wizards roster and you think like, are there a few too many guys who are high motor offensive players, who are high motor when the possibility of scoring is dangled in front of them? Or even if it's like on ball defensively when they can really zero in, speaking to your point about the focus, but just like don't have that particular sort of get up and go for the messy transitional spaces of basketball. Like it takes a very specific kind of gear to get there, and it's a really hard thing to teach, to be honest.
That's why I wonder, they want to play fast, and I understand why they want to play fast, because this team playing consistently in the half court is just like maybe not going to crack 100 points a game.
Yeah.
But
it also helps you lose more if you are bad, for the record. Like
that's a fair point.
Maximizing possessions if you're a bad team and want to be bad is not the worst idea in the world.
Yeah, but I wonder, because they're going so fast, is there less of an attentiveness they're able to play to the defensive rebound? Should there be more of an emphasis essentially of like, hey, let's get the rebound before we actually try and activate the transition game? And sometimes it feels like they get to step 2 before they actually have the ball, and before it's a kick out situation for an open 3.
As we were talking about, like, where will they be by the end of the season in these relative, like, big picture metrics? This might just be a team that's better off being 14th or 15th in pace as opposed to top 5 in pace for that exact reason. Like, still selectively run, still be looking for your opportunities. But if you're not disciplined about getting out to run in the first place, like, what made the Pacers last season is they were incredibly disciplined about getting those particular sorts of rebounds. And so it can't just all be downhill. Like, you have to mount the hill first.
Yeah, absolutely. My stock down, Bub Carrington.
He's on mine too.
Yeah, I think he's been on this before for me, and it's just been a really tough start to the season. One thing that I will say is a good thing. He's shooting really well from three. He's been very confident taking some pull-ups, but basically everything else has been pretty rough. I mean, what are you noticing about his game right now?
He looks incredibly out of control. Like when he does get the opportunities, it's like he'll turn the corner on a pick and roll, or he'll get it like a semi-open lane, and he doesn't even know what to do with himself. And I wonder if some of that is like early struggles, then feeding a little bit of panic, feeding, the pressure of wanting to convert these chances. He just like really needs to stabilize in the worst possible way, because it'd be crazy to write off a 20-year-old based off of a couple of weeks of play. Like, no one is trying to do that. But I can feel in my brain like starting to shift how I think about him when he has the ball in his hands and what I expect from those possessions. And like, this is how that process starts. And I think the shame for him right now is like he's not playing his way out of the team's plans by any stretch of the imagination right now. But like, this is an opportunity where he could have made himself a priority in what the Wizards are doing. And instead, it's very much the opposite. And I just straight up don't know how you shoot 28% on twos. Like, I don't know how that's a thing that is possible for a scorer as capable and clearly talented as Bub Carrington. And yet I'm watching it as he tries to attempt like off balance layups that he really shouldn't, as he settles for pull-ups in which he's like really not squared. And I know some of that is just like his style of scoring is that, but this is what it lends itself to at times.
You talk about him being out of control, and there's a play against Chicago where he and Tristan Vukcevic run a pick and pop, and the guard goes over the screen and is chasing Bub, and there's an opportunity for Bub to drive in, and he is just way too fast. There's no pace at all, and I don't know if he gets bumped a little bit. He's looking for a foul after the play, as are so many Wizards after so many plays, but he tries this like lefty scoop layup from the inner half of the free throw circle off his left foot. It just looks really awkward. It doesn't hit the rim at all. It's ugly, right? And so those are the kind of plays where I look at it and I'm like, I think there's such a better version of him if he just slows down a hair when he gets that advantage, instead of being like, oh, I have this advantage, let's go. Probe a little bit. You are a very smart player. You are someone who is a very cerebral player. Slow down. Let the game come to you, because there's that. Sometimes I think that he's predetermining reads before he even makes a play. He goes into a pick and roll saying, I'm going to make this lob pass. And the lob pass is not there. Or he says, I'm going to make this skip pass. And the skip pass is not there, but the lob is, right? And so it's one of those things where I don't know what the fix is other than him getting more reps and him getting more comfortable, because I love the reps when he plays with patience, because teams do have to respect his jump shot now. And the teams that don't, he is making sure to punish them. That is the one thing he has done this year. And the next step of that is when you've got the defender on your back, put him in jail a little bit, right? Like, slow down, probe the defense, and use your smarts, use your height as a ball handler to get yourself the right opportunity. And we'll see how it goes as the season goes along, but that's all. It's he needs to get in control a litter bit more on the offensive end.
He definitely does. I mean, for a player as good as he is, I don't know that I've seen anyone have more terrible misses this year. Like, just like, again, like some jumpers that like are so wide or so off from two that they just have no shot whatsoever. The process you're describing, though, I mean, that wall that you kind of have to run through as a creator, and I would say specifically as someone who comes into the league as a really instinctive on-ball player. And then you have all these thoughts put into your head and all these film sessions crammed into your head about like, okay, this is my read. As you're saying, that kind of predetermination of I'm trying to do the thing that my assistant coach has been yelling at me to do for 2 weeks. And yet I'm overthinking it to a degree that it is then taking away from all of like the fluid instinctive play that got me into the league in the first place. And some guys kind of they crumble under the weight of that sort of process. I'm not really worried about that with Bub. I just do not like anything about the way he's playing right now.
It was CJ McCollum who said yesterday that Bub, who actually had a pretty good game against Atlanta, the best thing he did was not hesitate, except for one play that CJ pointed out where he turns down a semi-open three-pointer, tries to get inside, and instead just travels, and it's a turnover. And the hesitation is something you see so often. The indecision, just at that split second when he gets the ball, is just enough to throw him off rhythm, throw the possession off rhythm, and it derails things for him. And with the Wizards, I don't know that it's been explicitly said at any point, but you can see that there's an emphasis for him to take less of the mid-range jumpers early in the clock and try and get downhill more. And I think those are good things for him down the line. This is a player who had a very late growth spurt in his career. And so he is still at times finishing like a small guard, but he's a big guard. He's like 6'4", right? And so he's someone who should be able to get better at that as time goes on. I have never fully grasped what is the realized version of Bub Carrington in the NBA right now. I have never been able to put my hands on what that player is. Do you have a better feel?
I think the best version of Bub is still probably an overqualified sixth man type. I think in part because, not just because of his size, but like the way he experiences the game and the way he plays. I don't feel like he has the greatest handle on like the logistics of running offense, right? Like, of like, this is the foundational style we play. I'm going to hit this pass in time and on target because that is like a function of what we do. And like he misses a lot of that stuff. And that's just something that young players do in general. But his strengths are always going to be elsewhere, I think. His strengths are always going to be a little looser. And so the more you can get him into a role where he can cook and has a little less responsibility to like maintain a system, I think the more effective he's going to be. I just don't think he is a point guard. And I don't mean that in like the stuffy, like John Stocktonian sense. I just mean like even a modern NBA point guard. I don't see him as like being well suited for that kind of starting spot.
Interesting. All right. Any other stock downs for you?
Just those three for me: the defense, the rebounding, Bub. I mean, look, there's lots of stock downs with this team, but we're pillorying enough.
Yeah. I will also say I would like to see a little better shooting from Justin Champagnie. It seemed like he kind of figured that out late last season, and it has not been so this year. He's also gotten very inconsistent minutes, so how you develop a rhythm and all that is all very difficult. But just as we talk about guys who can establish themselves with minutes, Justin Champagnie has not really gotten much of an opportunity so far this year, but even when he has gotten the opportunity, I don't know that he has made the best use of it to date. But a lot of season left. All right, ahead of the curve, what is an early, potentially too aggressive take that you're not tied to about these Washington Wizards?
I have a bad feeling that Tre Johnson is going to turn into like a real sticking point for this franchise. I know he's out right now. I know, like, do we have any timetable on the hip flexor stuff? Do we know when he's coming back?
I would say 2 to 4 weeks. They're going to reevaluate 2 weeks, but it's probably going to be 2 to 4.
This is a much larger conversation than like what's happening with the Wizards this week or even in 4 weeks when he comes back. But like he feels like a test case for organizational alignment to me. Clearly Michael Winger and his staff like thought enough of him to draft him at number 6. The scoring talent is obviously there. I wouldn't say that like based on just watching, it does not seem that Brian Keefe really trusts him at all. To be involved in almost any direct capacity with what the Wizards are running, to handle. Like when he's been out there, he's so much an accessory to everything that is happening on the court. I'm just like wondering where the rubber meets the road with all that. Is this a young player who, yes, everyone would love to see play more, but is on a team with a lot of other young players and thus is kind of marginalized in spots? Or is this something where it's going to be a capital T thing in the way that we've seen other front offices draft a promising young player and other coaches not necessarily love what that player gives them on the floor, and it becomes like a tension point for a team and specifically a franchise that's like trying to have a little more synergy in that sort of stuff.
It's weird to me. I mean, he got pretty consistent minutes, I would say, early in the season. They dropped off a little bit before he left with the hip injury, because of that hip injury, I should say.
Yeah, it's not even a minutes thing so much as like he's just kind of off in the corner and he's going to wait there until the ball comes to him. And like maybe that is the best use of his skill set right now. I see it. I'm like, why is he not involved in really any way at all?
It's one of those things where I would love to have some more of like the granular tracking data to see what his breakdown and play type looks like compared to someone like Corey Kispert, right? Because in theory, it feels like he should be someone that you're running stagger actions for, pin downs for, flares for, and just using him as a screener, weaponizing his shooting in the many different ways that you can do so in the modern NBA. And it doesn't feel like the Wizards have turned to that so far this year. I am curious how much of that is a coaching thing and how much of that is a young player getting up to speed in what I think is it's a read and react offense for the Wizards. It's not one where Brian Keefe is calling out play after play. It's one where you kind of see the patterns align and move based on that. And I wonder how well Tre is seeing the patterns right now. I'm very curious to see what it looks like as the season goes on, because the on-ball reps are pretty tough right now because his handle, I think, is okay. I've had some people say that it's better than that. I do not see that right now. I think that when he is got the ball in his hands and he's kind of running those actions, his head is kind of spinning as he sees the picture changing around him, and I don't think that the facilitating has been a particular strength for him so far. But it is weird that his he's been used more as an off-ball player than he ever has in his career, from what he told me. And the ways that he is being used in that role don't seem like they're actually maximizing what he should be in that role.
No. And look, I completely understand that maximizing Tre Johnson is not the only goal of the Washington Wizards right now. I think you nailed it though. Like what makes it like kind of jump is the fact that these sequences, these mechanisms, these plays are there for Corey Kispert. Like you're seeing other players run through the actions. It's like, why would you not run Tre Johnson through 2 to 3 of these a game when he's out there? Like, why is that something that's not even in the consideration set? I also want to be very clear, like in the defense of coaching this kind of team, when you have young player variables involved in every stage of your execution, like you've got young ball handlers and young screeners, and you're trying to run a young shooter off the ball in an organized way, you're really asking for trouble. So maybe it is a matter of like, we're already putting a lot on a lot of these guys. Let's do Kispert through this action instead of Johnson. But I just think that everything is there for this sort of developmental track to happen. And to this point, it just hadn't. But we'll see how it looks when he comes back from injury. We'll see how it looks later in the season. Like maybe it is just kind of a growth curve thing.
The one thing that leads me away from real concern is that the incentives align for Brian Keefe to maximize Tre Johnson. This isn't a situation where Brian Keefe is being pressured to win a lot of games and because of that has to try and maximize things for Corey Kispert, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that as the season goes on, I wonder as Tre gets more comfortable in the offense, what it looks like with how he is used. My early, potentially a too aggressive take is I can see a path to Bilal Coulibaly being a top 7 guy on a decent to good team that does not require him to be a 35% or better shooter from 3-point range.
Okay.
So the shooting does not come around. He's at 27.6% right now on about like 3 a game. He's taking them confidently. They're not really going down. But I still think that I'm seeing enough from him on both ends where I'm like, I would feel comfortable making you like my 7th man if I was a team that was trying to be somewhere between 5th and 8th.
For sure. I think 7th man is no problem. Like that he can get to in this form, more or less on this trajectory. The question is, can he get to your 4th or 5th best player on a team like that? And it's a more complicated conversation.
I say
there are guys who have done it. It's just really hard, specifically as a wing, kind of penciled in the way he would be penciled in.
Who are the guys that you feel have been able to do it? Because I went through just some of like the top teams from last year, and I was trying to see who in their major part of their rotation didn't shoot well from 3. And 2 guys that I looked at that, to varying degrees, what Russ was on that Denver team last year, where it's a very off-ball role, it's very cutting heavy, and then Josh Hart for the Knicks, where his shooting has been very inconsistent over his career.
I think so. What both those guys have in common is like 100th percentile motor, right? Like just absolutely revved up and going at all times. And that, helps you crash the glass and create opportunities. It helps you turn like semi-transition stuff into real transition stuff when you work that way. And so if Bilal is working at that kind of capacity, then yes, that opens up a lot. The other avenue is like, are you just one of the best wing defenders in basketball? Are you an Asar Thompson type where it's like, yes, teams are leaving you, but the combination of you're just slinky enough as a backdoor cutter, and the other side of that being like, do you have a playmaker who's actually going to find you in those circumstances, coupled with just the highest level possible defense? I think that's an avenue to become that sort of asset for a real competitive, if not contending team.
Yeah, Diet Asar Thompson would be a really good outcome for Bilal Coulibaly.
Would be pretty cool.
Yeah, because, I mean, I've liked a decent amount of what I've seen so far when he's been back. He's really decisive with the ball in his hands, which is something that went away late last season, and I think that's where you could see the growth and confidence for Bilal in year 3, because and when he gets downhill, he is in the 90th percentile among wings and shooting fouls drawn, and so he's not getting, like, I don't think the scoring is necessarily there, but even though that teams are sagging off of him, he's just so fast that he's able to get downhill and get fouled when he gets to the rim. So I think there's more for him to unlock as an offensive rebounder, someone who can crash the glass. His second leap ability is great. There's more for him to unlock at someone who gets deflections. There was a play yesterday where on a cross match, Kristaps has him posted up, and he kind of just like reaches around as an entry pass comes in, knocks it away. It's a steal. I want to see more instinctive, aggressive plays from Bilal Coulibaly like that, and
Totally.
that's where you talk about if he's just able to get dialed up to the 100th percentile in terms of motor every single night. That's a player where I'm really excited because he's like he doesn't need much space to get past you because of what a quick twitch athlete he is, and so that's where you could see some growth for him.
He's also the kind of talent too where he's going to benefit from having real star level creators around him. Like his facilitation is, I would say, even better than someone like a Sarr, who's like is a nice passer and kind of connect dots. I would say Bilal is a little more advanced than that. And so the more you have people who are actually bringing two to the ball, actually creating advantages reliably, and then Bilal is the second guy who you're hitting on the roll or the cut, that's something that's only going to add to his game. And so the better the Wizards look, the better Bilal will naturally look as a result. And so it's hard to place a player like that because he is not the driving force of what will make a team great, but he could enhance an already good team pretty easily.
Absolutely. All right, what's a question you have about the Wizards over the next week?
Is there a single thing they can take away from their absolute mopping of the Atlanta Hawks and carry forward? And I say, like, I watched that game. They shot incredibly well, but they'd already been shooting pretty well. CJ McCollum, as we said, just was at a level that I would not be fair to ask him to replicate. And so, yes, even if he continues to play well, we're not banking on that happening again. They ran super hard. They beat the Hawks down the floor. They did force turnovers, as you mentioned. I guess the turnovers part of that was a little distinct, but otherwise, this is a team that plays fast and tries to beat teams down the floor regularly with, marginal success. And so it felt like the Wizards playing like the Wizards. It's just I looked up and all of a sudden they were up 18-2 for reasons I could not fairly articulate to you.
I guess the two things I would say is they were a little bit better with their offensive execution overall. Some of it was just shots going in, but I do think that some of what we saw from Chris Middleton orchestrating the offense looked better. I would like to see them tap into that a little bit more. We'll see what the prognosis is with Corey Kispert in the thumb, but I really like him in the starting lineup. I think the returns you've seen there are really great. I love some of the things he did. There was one play yesterday where I don't know exactly how they got to this, but at some point it turned into an inverted pick and roll for Alex Sarr with Corey as a screener, and the amount of space it opened up for Sarr to get downhill was fantastic. I also liked how aggressive Sarr was the second a smaller guy was on him. This is something he's done earlier this year, but there have been moments where he'll get a smaller guy and maybe someone doesn't get him the entry pass and he doesn't really go for the offensive rebound, but there was a play yesterday where that happened. He didn't get the entry pass, but he dominated the glass, and that's something where if you can punish teams for switching those actions, that's something that can activate him a little bit more. My question is, because of that Atlanta game, can you string something together? I don't need the Wizards to win games. I don't think that they want to win a lot of games, obviously, and it's just based on where the team is. That's not reasonable, but there were things that they did against Atlanta that I would like to see them carry over just in terms of the attention on defense in particular. And so are you able to clean up some of those things? Are you able to force a few more turnovers? Are you able to carry any of this forward? You don't have exactly a premier opponent coming up in Indiana, so we'll see.
Definitely some opportunities there. And I think specifically to attack and have that kind of focus against teams like the Hawks, right? These more democratic offenses where it's not like you're battening down the hatches and hoping to God that you can stop Nikola Jokic, right? It is for these teams that are a little more balanced, can you be active enough and disruptive enough to get out in those passing lanes to just jam up their operations a little bit? That's something that's within Washington's power to do. And that's where you hope some of those young guys in particular can take a step.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the schedule. It's Indiana. It's Milwaukee. I don't think Giannis is back yet. Philly, obviously, is a different consideration. Boston, you got Brown, but then you got Atlanta again. And then it's San Antonio. We'll see what the status of Wemby is at that point in time.
Yeah.
But it's not again, the Wizards do not win a lot of games. But can you avoid a 14-game losing streak? Can you avoid an extended losing streak? Lose 7 at a time. That's fine. Just
one can dream.
As long as you avoid double digits, I think it stops weighing on the team as much as I think this long stretch and some of the stretches they had last year did.
Right.
But, all right, Rob Mahoney, where can people find your work?
Always at theringer.com, always on the Ringer NBA show, wherever you find your podcasts. And hopefully, just glued to my Wizards watching every League Pass game imaginable.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. We will definitely be having you on again.
Thanks, Varun. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much to Rob for coming on, and thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow me at Varun Shankar on basically every social platform, and you can find the show using the handles in the episode description. Also, check out my work at the Washington Post. I just published a story about Alex Sarr's excellent performance against the Atlanta Hawks. For those who celebrate, happy Thanksgiving. I'll talk to you in a week.